welcome to the second episode of the podcast Bleed Between the Lines. We are going to be talking about late diagnosis and no diagnosis in women's health and the lack of research in women's health. I'm Alex.
I'm Genevieve.
And we're here with a very special guest. This is Ellie. Tell us a bit about yourself, Ellie.
Okay, so I've always had issues with doctors listening to me and doctors actually looking at what's going on with me as a whole. And so I've actually got quite a few issues. The main one currently that I'm having to face is endometriosis. So endometriosis is where your uterine wall lining starts growing on your other organs within your body, and it's incredibly painful, and it genuinely takes a toll on your life. Yet the amount of research that I've found personally that's done towards it is absolutely abysmal. So I've got endometriosis, but then I've also got a few comorbidities. So for example, I have a lack of iron in my blood. I get chronic migraines due to we don't actually know why it's due for. I've actually been in the doctors with that since I was 7, and it took them a good 7 years for them to actually be like, yeah, you know what? We think that this is chronic migraine. I've been put on a lot of different medications for it, and they've had to trial so many different things, yet it's taken 7 years for them to be like, you know what, we don't really know what we're doing towards it, but we know you've got this.
We were talking outside about how there is more research about male baldness than there is about endometriosis, which is crazy because male baldness doesn't affect your health. Doesn't affect how you feel. Well, it might affect your self-esteem, but it's not a debilitating disease.
Mm-hmm.
But why is that more important to doctors than endometriosis?
It's really wild because I was in the hospital I think it was 3 weeks ago now, and I was having an ultrasound scan done by a technician, and the technician kept on speaking to me about how the amount of research that we've actually got towards endometriosis, because it's currently you can only get it properly diagnosed through keyhole surgery, which is number one, invasive. It takes time out of your life because then you've got to heal from surgery. But they're currently trying to find ways where they can find it through ultrasound, but obviously all of the technicians, especially from what I know in York, they have absolutely no training towards that whatsoever. So I had this scan done and they went, so we can't see anything, yet you've got such a long history of perpetually getting cysts, extremely painful periods. So we're getting you referred to gynecology. However, nothing's set in stone yet. But this has been something that I've been dealing with since I was, I think, 13. That's when my period started. And it's constantly been terrible. They've done a lot of different things. I've been on.
So does the pain happen every month when you get the period, or is it all the time?
So this is actually really interesting. So before I got my IUD, because I've been on several different types of birth control to try and help with my periods, but before I got my IUD, I was taking the pill, and the pill, number one, didn't stop my periods. They said that it was meant to, but because mine were incredibly heavy and incredibly excruciating, I still got cramps, and I still got, I would bleed through both a pad and a tampon. It was, I had to put in a lot of effort towards just trying to make sure that I could exist within my normal life. But what would happen is that I would still get all of these pains, and they can last from being 4 days to months on end. The last time I had what's considered a flare-up, it was 2 months of me not being able to, some days I couldn't get out of bed, which obviously it takes a toll on everything. I can't see my friends, I can't go to uni, I can't go to work, and so it just kind of it kind of puts a real damper on what's going on in your life, you know?
To put it lightly.
Yeah.
Just put a little damper on it.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually crazy because as someone who menstruates and stuff, I didn't have, obviously I knew about endometriosis and stuff, but I didn't know about the effect that it has and how bad it can actually get. So
Yeah.
Because that's like a shock to me.
Well, until you said it just then, I didn't know what it actually was. I knew it was a thing, and I knew it affected like what it affected, but I didn't know that it was like the organs being all that stuff on the inside. I didn't even think about it.
It's actually really. I'm not gonna say insane because obviously it's happening to so many people across the country. Like, but not only is it your uterine lining like growing within your body, there are actually stages to endometriosis. So you can get up to stage 4, and stage 4 is where it starts fusing your organs together. Endometriosis can actually spread up to your lungs.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So one of my sisters, so my sister's a teacher, and one of her friends in teaching, she has endometriosis and she's at stage 3, and her actual vaginal wall and like bowel have fused together. And so not only is she having to get surgeries for the endometriosis to get rid of the tissue within her body, she's also having to get surgeries to stop her like organs from fusing
Separate
together.
them.
Yeah.
It's crazy that like they must be knowledgeable that this is having such an effect on so many people, but they're not. I'm not saying they're actively not putting in the money and the effort into researching it, but it doesn't seem like either they're not researching it enough or they're not finding anything. Like, maybe they are researching it loads and we just can't see that because nothing's coming of it, but it feels like that should be not the main focus of attention because there's other things, but like that should be ahead of some other things that are getting a lot more attention, because if it can lead to such like debility, it's not just having extra pain every month, it can lead to actual like serious health concerns.
Yeah.
And that's crazy that like I didn't even know it was a thing until like the first time I ever heard of it was what's her name, Bindi, Stephen Irwin's daughter.
Yes.
She had endometriosis and she almost died, and she went on a thing and talked about it, and that is the first time I'd ever heard of it.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a thing, which is insane that it's such a like big thing that happens to so many people, and I didn't even know it happened. I was completely oblivious.
Yeah, well, I do think it comes from like a lack of knowledge and awareness around the topic. So like up until like from what I've seen at least 10 years ago, people didn't speak about endometriosis whatsoever. Like there was awareness around things like polycystic ovary syndrome, which is something that runs through my family, but like when it comes to endometriosis, there isn't much awareness on it at all. I know that it's become a bit more like within media recently, because I know that Molly May speaks about her experiences, video when like and I'm seeing a lot more like things on my social media about it, but I don't know if that's because that's now things that I'm like trying to engage with, so I can know more about what's going on with me. Yeah, TikTok is where I've like learned, either from TikTok or like people I know, is where like the most of the information I've got is from, which is a thing I like about TikTok, because people can decide what they think's important to be on there, because like the news, I don't think I've ever seen a story on the news about endometriosis. Yeah. But there's people behind that deciding what gets through and what's important. Whereas with our generation, we can inform each other, and that's what this podcast is trying to do, isn't to inform people, but to open it as a discussion and make people aware that these things are happening. Because like even if this just like reaches one person that's never heard of it before, and then they go and research it and they learn about that, then that's something good we're doing. When it comes to like endometriosis, the amount of time it takes for it to be diagnosed. Yeah, it said between 8 to 10 years was the average of how long it takes to be diagnosed with it. I saw something recently which said that if you were first experiencing endometriosis like symptoms now, it would take until July 2033 for you to actually get diagnosed with it. And that is an extortionate amount of time.
Yeah. And by that point, how bad's it gotten?
Exactly.
People. I think what's not paid attention to is that people can die from it, and like in 9 years' time, in 8-9 years' time, people might have died from it, and because they haven't been diagnosed, so you haven't been able to like do anything about it. So then you think about it afterwards, like, oh, we should have done that, but there's no point thinking about what we should have done because
Exactly.
it's a bit
Do you
late.
need a diagnosis to have things done about it?
So currently what's happening, especially now, I'm being referred to gynecology, where they're going to then hopefully refer me for surgery. However, obviously that's me having a keyhole surgery, but also if you're not like during a flare-up, so like a flare-up is where the actual uterine lining is coming off your like organs, and you end up it's internally bleeding. You are internally bleeding at that point, and that's why it's excruciating. But you know, so they're gonna refer me to gynecology. I got a phone call about that like 2 days ago, and then they're going to refer me for surgery. But then they're also, one thing that they tend to do, rather than trying to fix the issue, is that they bring preventative measures. So I've been to the hospital with this a good 6 times now, I think. It started getting really bad when I was like 16. But from going to the hospital, the amount of times where they've been like, it's only recently where they've brought up endometriosis. Beforehand, I was still getting cysts, like on my ovaries, and I was still in excruciating pain. Yet what they do is, they'd be like, okay, so we can tell that you're in a lot of pain. We can tell that something's wrong here. Like whenever I'd have a cyst, it would show up in the ultrasounds. However, all they would do is either give me codeine or tell me to take paracetamol and ibuprofen and have a warm bath.
Oh.
Have a warm bath.
Yeah.
That's gonna fix all your problems.
Well, it's really interesting, especially in my experience, the amount of things that doctors have just said
Yeah.
as a preventative measure.
Go on
Yeah.
a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that one.
So like.
Get some sunlight. Okay.
I've had to take a warm bath, have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, so with myochronic migraines as well, because they are like a comorbidity within endometriosis, that took, as I said, 7 years for it to get diagnosed, and I've been on several different medications. But for a while, they made it so I couldn't eat chocolate. I couldn't have, I can't eat chocolate. What do you mean by that? But I also couldn't have carbs for a while.
Seeing if it's diet related.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to like be in places where there was bright fluorescent light.
Did you have to keep a food diary? At any
Yep,
point?
I've had to keep a
love
food
those.
diary.
I
I've
love
had to keep
food
a
diaries.
migraine diary. Having to write down every single time you can't really see isn't very fun.
They're just little squiggles on a piece of paper. Oh, that's
Yeah.
another one.
I think also when it comes to like the amount of them, especially when it comes to the doctors asking you to make diaries for things, the amount of evidence that you need like yourself to put towards something rather than them just listening to you is quite interesting.
Because I'm not always like, when those things are happening, like I was supposed to keep a food diary for like like stomach problems.
Yeah.
And when it's happening, I'm not thinking about writing it down. I'm just thinking about, I hope it goes away.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like, oh, I need to go get my notepad and pen and write this down. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, ow. Like, stop.
I think it comes to a point where like you start getting seen as just information on paper
Yeah.
rather than like a person who is actually having to experience these things.
Yeah.
I think especially in some respects with the doctors, I was 16 and I'd been referred to pediatric gynecology because still at that point I was still a child, but I'd been referred there and I'd had to go to several doctor's appointments, and at the end of it they decided that they were going to like leave me with you need to lose weight and I need to take paracetamol, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was speaking with the hospital this time around about that, and they were like, well, it's actually because like people with a certain, what is it called, where BMI, people with a certain BMI can't actually get the keyhole surgeries that they need to be able to like actually diagnose you with these things, which, number one, I personally don't think that's true.
Yeah, that just doesn't really feel like that big of a thing.
Yeah.
Can't happen because of that insignificant of a detail.
As a 16-year-old who, like, to be fair, I wasn't, like, I wouldn't say that I was extremely overweight either, but to be a 16-year-old, so you're still at the point in your life where you're still quite self-conscious about things, for the doctors to straight up tell you, oh yeah, for us to do anything at all, you need to lose weight, it's kind of, like, preposterous.
So that would feed into, like, have I made myself worse? Like, am I doing this to myself?
Exactly.
Like, and then it makes you less want to seek help for it.
It makes you not want to go to the doctors.
Yeah.
So the last time I did go to the doctors, I was with 2 of my friends and they brought me to A&E, but I was adamant that I did not want to go.
I saw you that day and you had no colour in your face. You were like yellow, and me and my mum were like, are you okay?
Yeah.
You don't look okay.
And when we got to A&E, it actually took 9 hours for us to get seen.
Oh,
so,
it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. No,
obviously it's not their fault because they run off their feet.
Exactly.
It is, like...
I'm so happy for the NHS. # love the NHS, but like, speed up the wait times, please.
It comes to the amount of like funding that is put into both actual like specific problems like endometriosis to the NHS as a whole.
Yeah.
Like,
but then that money, there's so much money going to things that we don't need.
That I would like to bring up your guys' experience with ADHD.
Yeah. I was like 14, 15 when my mum first brought up to me that she thought I had ADHD, and it was because of the pandemic. So I was sat in my room trying to do work, and that's when my mum saw, like, for herself how much I actually struggled to focus and do things, and how much I'd actually get distracted. Like, she'd come in and I'd be like doing my makeup, she'd be like, well, you're not doing your work? Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. And I'd just forget. So she brought that up, and then we had like a chat about it, and she was like, well, do you struggle with this? Like, she did some research. So we rung the doctors, and obviously as well there's a massive list.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's great that you can get a free diagnosis, but like a 3-year long list, it does make you feel quite like, oh, like, will I get what I need in time? Because what I needed was like extra time and allowances around my essays while I was doing my A-levels, because obviously I didn't have them in time for my GCSEs. So it was the anxiety around, oh, what do we do? But we went to the doctors to talk to them about it, and well, first of all, he was really grumpy. He was in a really bad mood, and he came in and he was like, it was meant to be an online appointment, and we were like, well, we weren't told that, and he was like, right, well, come on in then. And he was really grumpy and blunt. Bearing in mind, I was 15, 16 years old. I was so anxious, didn't really know what to expect. And this was my first proper appointment about ADHD. And he was really blunt and really quite off with us, and then just asked really like, do you do a lot of work? And I was like, yeah, I do. And he was like, right, okay. And my mum was like, for Genevieve, a lot of work is different to what it is for someone else, because obviously I'm going to feel like I'm doing a lot of work if I've done like a page of work, but for other people it'd be 3 pages. But he was like, oh well, okay, you do a lot of work. He didn't specify. And then at the end of the whole appointment, he looked at me and went, you've just got anxiety. Like, all of this, it's just anxiety. It's got nothing to do with ADHD. So me and my mum, I remember sitting in the car and crying because I felt like I wasn't being listened to, because I feel like with things like autism and ADHD, there's more research on how it appears in males. And my mum did research on it as well, and so did I. And it shows in women in completely different ways. Like with ADHD, an example is like with excessive talking, but women are also taught to mask.
Yeah.
Whereas men, it's kind of like, oh well, it's just, you know,
boys being boys.
Yeah. But it's so much more difficult to get an ADHD diagnosis as a woman. And we ended up having to pay a lot of money to go private so that I could have that diagnosis. And when I got diagnosed, they said, oh, you've definitely got ADHD and it's quite severe. It's like, right,
Yeah,
not
well,
anxiety then.
Well, I haven't been diagnosed with anything. I am currently in the process, but the first time, I didn't really know it was a word until I knew it was a thing because I watched an episode of Super Nanny, and one of the little boys was really naughty. They were like, well, he's been diagnosed with ADHD, so he needs like accommodations for it. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. And then I didn't think about it, and then I got a bit older and I learnt what it was, and I was like, those kind of match up with how I feel. And like, I've had a lot of issues with friends and keeping friends and talking too much and being too much. So during college, it was quite late in life, but during college I mentioned it to my mum because I'd thought about it for a while, but I have a fear of people being like, you're just making it up, because my family, I love my family, they're great, but I have been known to make things up, so like they don't really believe me when things happen anymore. So I mentioned it to my mum, and she was like, I don't think you do. She was like, if you have anything, it'll be ADD. And I was like, Mum, that doesn't exist. First of all, doesn't exist anymore, so scratch that off the cards. But she said, and I said to her last time I saw her, because she still sticks by this, and I said to her, but why? And she was like, because you're not hyperactive. And I was like, one, you don't see me all the time. You don't see me when I'm with my friends. You see me when I am at home with my mother.
In your best behaviour.
Yeah, like, but I don't know where she comes in with that when I used to go into their room when they're about to go to bed and do a dance performance for them for about half an hour. It'd be like 11 and they'd be getting ready for bed, they'd be reading their books, and I'd be like, now I'm going to sing Popular to you. So I don't know where she comes in with that. But she was like, but you're not hyperactive, and she'd be like, I work with students, because my mum works in a school for kids who have been excluded from their mainstream schools. So she was like, I work with kids with ADHD, and you're nothing like them. You're not naughty, you don't get into trouble, you do your work. And I was like...
But it presents differently,
I was like,
especially in women.
So I don't get paid attention to because I'm not disrupting a lesson. And I said to my mum, I was like, Mother, with all due respect, you know I didn't do my work in high school. I slept through all my lessons. I'm obviously not happy about COVID, but it did me a favour because it meant that I could do my GCSEs next to other people and just be like, what you saying? Because I slept through all my lessons. But like, and my mum would be like, well, it doesn't seem like it, if you have it, it won't be very severe because it's not affecting your life. I was like, but Mother, you're not in my brain.
Yeah.
It does affect my life. It affects every aspect of my life. It affects my relationships with people. It affects how much work I do. Like, people think I'm lazy, and like teachers my entire life have just thought I'm lazy. And I'm like, no, I try so hard, but I can't do it. Because if I go into like uni or like college or school and I'm like, I haven't done the homework, and they'll be like, that's your responsibility. And I'll be like, I looked at my homework and it was in a really big paragraph, so I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense to people who don't have my brain.
Paragraphs aren't accessible.
Yeah, I can't make sense of your work if you're giving it to me in a big chunk.
Yeah,
but like,
it's really interesting because when you mentioned ADD, it just reminded me that even though I went private, they actually couldn't officially diagnose me with ADHD. They diagnosed me with ADD, and it was because I felt like I had to mask at school, and because I didn't disrupt classes, even though I did because I used to chat a lot. But because I have anxiety, so I'd mask a lot and try to kind of keep it in. School obviously had to write stuff about like different aspects. I scored really low on the hyperactivity score of it, but because the school scores mattered so much, they couldn't officially diagnose me with it, but they said to me like, we can only diagnose you with ADD, but you have ADHD, but we can't officially diagnose you with it because your school hasn't given you a high enough
interesting that
score.
they themselves knew, but they couldn't
actually
tell you
can't.
for sure.
Yeah.
But like,
so
they knew.
Whenever I say to someone, the uni, I'll say to them, well, I have ADHD, they're like, you have ADD? And I'm like, please listen to me.
I have a question. So like, if you don't mind me asking, how much did it actually cost for you to go private?
At least £1,000.
It's insane.
That would never happen. my family just cannot
Well,
afford
you
that.
know, the lack of accessibility when it comes to things.
It could have been, it will have been more, because you have to pay for the, obviously for the appointment, the assessment, and the results.
Diagnoses. Yeah.
Well, the way it happened for me so far, during college, I went to our local GP for an appointment. The woman there, absolutely lovely, loved her. She talked me through what would happen, and she gave me a form and was like, fill this out, it's got all the questions, and then you'll email it back in, and then you'll hear back whether or not you'll be put onto a waiting list, because if they think no, they'll just won't keep you going, and then from that you'll get put on a waiting list. So she gave me the form, and she said to me, bless her cotton socks, she was like, don't hold back on every question. Like, if you have to use the back of the paper, use the back of the paper, write as much as you can about how it affects you.
One of the things that I've always been told.
Don't underplay anything.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always been told with forms is that you need to write on that form as if it's your worst day.
Yeah. So I was given that form. I hold my hands up. It took me 7 months to email it because I just put it down and then was like, I'll get to it. Which I feel like should be a diagnosis in itself. But yeah, I was like, I'll get to it, and then I sent it back 7 months later, and I think that was 2 years ago. Haven't heard anything. Not a single thing, not a phone call.
Wow.
Haven't heard anything. And my mum was like, it's a bit worrying that we haven't heard anything, and I was like, yeah. So she said, if you don't hear anything, in a few more months we're gonna call and say, has it got lost, or what's happening?
Yeah.
Because like, I'm fine being on a waiting list, but I'd like to know I'm on the waiting list
Yeah.
first, because they said they'd let us know if they were putting us on a waiting list or not. So if they've just decided not to and not told me, I don't know what's happened, but I haven't had any contact from them since.
I think when it comes to diagnoses and late diagnoses especially, is the biggest problem is the lack of accessibility. So if you want to get it done quickly, you have to pay extortionate amounts of money. If you do actually want to start getting it done through the NHS, it'll take so much of your time and so much of your energy.
And it affects your mental health
And it affects your mental health. Like, I feel like if there was more awareness and more knowledge towards things like ADHD, endometriosis, autism, chronic migraines, all of these things, if there was more awareness towards it, then I feel like the time frame that it does take for things like this to get diagnosed, it would be a lot quicker.
Another thing with the ADHD thing is one of the reasons they have such a long wait list is because it became popular. It went on TikTok, it became popular to have ADHD, so all of these people are like, I have ADHD, so now it's backlogged so much from people thinking it's cool, and I don't really know where they come in there. But we have been talking for quite a while, so is there anything you want to say to wrap up your points?
I think.
Or should I get on with setting my homework for the week? Every episode we will set you some homework, and the homework I will set for you today is to read an article called The Transformative Power of an ADHD Diagnosis for Older Women, and it's from Attitude, ADD, Itude. It's about ADHD in older women, and all of the people in this research are talking, and they're all above 60, and they're talking about their experiences about being diagnosed with ADHD later in life, and it's all women, and it was very nice to read. Well, not nice to read, but it was very interesting.
Insightful.
Yeah, and I learnt a lot, and I think it's good for anyone who is interested. Anything else to say?
No.